8 Japanese fighters close in. No clouds, no cover, just open sky and geometry. The P-38 pilot banks hard, not away from them, but toward a precise angle most would never consider. Within 90 seconds, all 8 lose visual contact. They scatter, confused, searching empty air. The Americans called him a calculator pilot, a desk jockey with a slide rule. But that morning over the Solomon Islands, math became survival. The year is 1943. The South Pacific Theater sprawls across thousands of miles of ocean, coral, and volcanic rock. Here, air superiority means life. Lose it, and ground forces die isolated. Supply lines vanish. Islands become tombs. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning arrives as a response to distance. Twin engines, twin booms, a central nacelle cradling the pilot between 2 Allison power plants. It climbs fast, flies far, and hits hard, but it's also new, complex, and misunderstood. Most pilots come from single-engine trainers. They know the growl of one motor, the simplicity of one propeller's torque. The P-38 demands something else. 2 throttles, 2 mixtures, 2 propeller controls, engines counter-rotating to cancel torque. It's a symphony, not a solo, and many hate it for that. They call it the fork-tailed devil when it works, a flying coffin when it doesn't. Compressibility troubles plague early models. In steep dives, control surfaces lock. The nose tucks under. Recovery becomes impossible. Pilots die trying to pull out, crushed by physics they can't see. Engineers scramble, modifications trickle in. But trust, once broken, is slow to return. In the humid air of New Guinea and Guadalcanal, maintenance crews work through rain and mud. Generators hum, fuel trucks idle, mechanics curse corroded fittings and parts that take weeks to arrive. The jungle eats everything: paint, fabric, courage. Pilots sleep in tents, wake to the growl of distant Zeros, and brief under tarps strung between trees. Maps spread on plywood tables show patrol routes, intercept vectors, and the vast blue nothing between here and home. Fighter tactics in the Pacific differ from Europe. No tight formations over cities, no flak walls. Instead, it's ambush and pursuit over endless water. Height is life, speed is escape. And vision, the ability to see first and position better, often decides who returns. Japanese pilots fly the Mitsubishi A6M0 with terrifying skill. Light, agile, deadly in a turning fight. American doctrine says, don't dogfight them. Use speed, use altitude. Dive, shoot, climb away. But doctrine is written by men far from the fire. Radio chatter is clipped and tense. Engine noise drowns nuance. A lost wingman is a dead wingman. Every mission stretches nerves thin. The sky looks empty until it isn't. Then it's full of tracers, smoke trails, and the gut-punch realization that someone just tried to kill you. Surviving that once is luck. Surviving it repeatedly requires something else. Pattern recognition, timing, and the coldness to think while your hands shake on the yoke. Some pilots adapt naturally. They feel the airplane, trust instinct, and react. Others think too much, hesitate, and die puzzled. But there's a third kind, rare. They see the fight not as chaos, but as a system. Variables in motion, angles and energy states, they calculate even as they sweat. If you want more such stories, like and subscribe so these lives aren't forgotten. Before the war, he was an engineering student, not at MIT or Caltech, but a solid state school in the Midwest. He studied structures, loads, and stresses, how beams bend, how forces resolve. His notebooks were neat, margins filled with sketched free body diagrams. While others memorized, he visualized. Professors noted his precision, but not his name. He was quiet. Average height, average build, Unremarkable until you gave him a problem. He didn't enlist for glory. The draft wasn't yet breathing down his neck. He enlisted because the newspaper showed burned ships at Pearl Harbor, and he decided logic demanded a response. The recruiter asked if he wanted to fly. He said yes, though he'd never been in a cockpit. The aptitude tests came easy: spatial reasoning, mathematics, reaction time. He scored high enough to raise eyebrows, but not so high anyone called him gifted. Flight school began in Texas, single-engine trainers first, the Stearman biplane, then the Vultee BT-13. He soloed on time, no drama. Instructors marked him competent but uninspired. He didn't buzz the field or showboat in formation. He flew the numbers, airspeed by the book, bank angles by the manual. Other cadets joked he'd make a great airline pilot someday, flying straight lines while passengers napped. Then came advanced training and the P-38. The Air Corps needed Lightning pilots badly. The airplane's complexity washed out some students. Others crashed trying to master asymmetric thrust on one engine. He approached it like a textbook. He memorized engine-out procedures. He practiced single-engine go-arounds until his hands moved without thought. He calculated power settings for different altitudes and speeds, filling a small notebook he kept in his flight suit. Instructors noticed he asked odd questions, not about combat tactics, but about energy management. How much speed do you lose in a 60-degree bank at 15,000 feet? What's the turn radius difference between 250 knots and 300? He wasn't daydreaming. He was building an internal model, a mental slide rule of what the airplane could and couldn't do. Graduation came without fanfare, orders to the Pacific, a long boat ride, then a tent with 5 other pilots on a muddy strip hacked from jungle. His first combat sortie was an escort mission, bombers to Rabaul. The formation droned north. Nothing happened. He flew wing, kept position, returned. After landing, others talked adrenaline and nerves. He wrote numbers in his notebook: fuel burn, time at altitude, temperature variations. The other pilots started calling him the calculator, not with malice, just bemusement. He didn't drink much, didn't swap stories. At night, while they played cards, he sketched diagrams by flashlight. Top-down views of aircraft in various angles, sight pictures from the cockpit. He was mapping the geometry of combat in his mind. No one thought he'd last long. Too cerebral, not aggressive enough. War, they believed, rewarded instinct and guts. But no one yet understood that in 3 dimensions, at 300 miles per hour, instinct is just calculation done fast. And he was learning to calculate faster than most men could blink. By mid-1943, American pilots face a persistent problem. Japanese fighters, especially the Zero, dominate the turning fight. U.S. doctrine is clear. Don't turn with them. Use the P-38's speed and climb rate. Boom and zoom. Extend away. Re-engage from advantage. But what happens when you can't extend? When you're alone, low on fuel, or jumped from above? Pilots die following the script. Zeros swarm. Even a 2-ship element of P-38s can be overwhelmed by numbers. The Lightning is faster in a straight line, but combat isn't a drag race. It's a tangle, a whirl of momentary decisions, and once you're defensive, once they're on your 6, the book says dive away. But diving burns altitude, and if you're already low, diving means the ocean. Intelligence briefs discuss zero tactics. They work in pairs or larger groups, slashing from above, forcing American fighters into turns that bleed speed. Once slow, the P-38 becomes a target. Its roll rate is sluggish compared to the nimble Zero. Ailerons feel heavy at high speed. Pilots report feeling trapped, turning hard but unable to shake a pursuer. Losses mount. Some men bail out and are never found. Others ditch near friendly coastlines and spend days in a raft, sun-blistered and delirious. A few make it back with bullet holes stitched across wings and fuselage, swearing they'll never fly again. But they do, because the missions keep coming. Squadron commanders emphasize situational awareness. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't get separated. Stay fast. But awareness doesn't help when you're the target of a coordinated attack. 8 or 10 zeros converging from different angles. Tracers arcing toward you. Instinct says brake hard. Panic says do something, anything, and often that something gets you killed. Engineering solutions are proposed. More armor, better radios, improved tactics. But armor adds weight. Radios fail in the humidity, and tactics only work if everyone follows them. Reality is messier. A flight gets split by weather. A green pilot fixates on a target and doesn't see the bounce. Someone's engine quits, and suddenly you're covering his glide with 4 enemies inbound. There's a deeper issue, though. One rarely articulated. Most fighter pilots think in terms of maneuvers. A hard brake, a chandelle, an Immelmann. Discrete actions with names. But air combat is continuous. Every change in bank, pitch, or power affects everything else. Speed trades for altitude, altitude trades for position, position trades for a firing solution. It's a calculus problem at 20,000 feet with guns. The calculator pilot sees this. He begins to notice something others miss. When a Zero pursues a P-38 in a hard turn, the Zero pilot relies on keeping the target in his gun sight. He leads the turn, predicts where the P-38 will be, and fires. But the gun sight is an assumption. It assumes constant bank, constant speed. If those variables shift unpredictably, the sight picture breaks. What if, instead of turning harder, you turned differently? Not a continuous arc, but a sudden shift in plane of motion, a roll into a new axis while briefly unloading the elevator. The attacker expects continuation. His brain, his reflexes, his gun sight all predict smooth geometry. Interrupt that, even for a second, and he loses the angle. He has to reacquire. And reacquisition takes time. Time is distance. Distance is survival. But no one teaches this. It's not in the manual. And suggesting it invites ridicule. You're supposed to dogfight less, not invent new ways to do it. Yet the question nags at him. If the problem is predictability, can you survive by becoming unpredictable in a calculated way? He doesn't have an answer yet. Just a hypothesis, and no safe way to test it. It starts with an argument in the ready tent. The squadron has just lost 2 pilots in a single mission. Both were bounced. Both tried to dive away. One was caught in compressibility and went straight in. The other was last seen trailing smoke, heading for a cloud bank that wasn't there. The mood is grim. The intelligence officer rehashes the same advice. Maintain speed, stay in pairs, don't get slow. The calculator pilot speaks up, quiet but clear. He suggests that diving away isn't always the answer, that sometimes changing the plane of the turn, using roll rate and load factor manipulation, might break an attacker's tracking solution. He talks about angular rates and sight picture disruption. He mentions the human lag in reacquisition. Silence. Then someone laughs. Another pilot, a veteran with 4 kills, shakes his head. "This isn't engineering school," he says. "This is combat. You don't have time to think. You react." The Zero turns tighter. End of story. Trying to outmaneuver them in the horizontal is suicide. Everyone knows that. The squadron commander, an older captain with tired eyes, cuts in. He respects the thought, he says, but the doctrine is sound. Use your strengths, speed and firepower. Don't reinvent the wheel. The meeting ends. The calculator pilot says nothing more, but he doesn't forget. Over the next week, he flies 5 more missions. Each time, he experiments in small ways. A hard roll reversal after a shallow dive, a brief inverted push to change altitude while turning. Nothing dramatic, just enough to test the feel. He begins to sense the edges of what's possible. The P-38's ailerons are heavy, yes, but they work. And once you're inverted or knife edge, the elevator becomes a horizontal rudder. The airplane can move in ways that don't match the textbook diagrams. He tries to explain this to his wingman one evening. The wingman is polite but skeptical. He asks if the calculator pilot has ever actually evaded someone using this. Not yet, the pilot admits. Then how do you know it works? The wingman asks. The calculator pilot pauses. He doesn't, but the math suggests it should. The wingman shrugs. Math didn't save the guys we lost. Fair point. But math also built the airplane they're sitting in, designed the engine, calculated the fuel load. War is math, whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is whether you calculate before the fight or during it. He knows he's an outsider, not part of the fraternity of natural sticks. He doesn't have the easy confidence of men who have logged 300 hours in single-seat fighters before the war. He's just a guy with a notebook and a theory. But theories can be tested, and the Pacific Theater is a laboratory with no shortage of data. The breakthrough comes by accident. A routine patrol turns chaotic. A flight of 4 P-38s stumbles into a gaggle of Zeros escorting a lone reconnaissance plane. The engagement scatters. The calculator pilot finds himself alone, 4 Zeros pursuing. They're above him, slashing down. He brakes left, then reverses hard right. 1 Zero overshoots, but 3 more are converging. He doesn't dive. Instead, he pulls into a climb, then snap rolls inverted and pulls through, changing his flight path 90 degrees while losing only a few knots. The Zero behind him fires where he was, not where he is. The pilot sees the tracers arc past, missing by a plane length. He repeats the maneuver, varying the roll axis. Another burst misses. The Zeros are fast, but their pilots are momentarily confused. He's not trying to dogfight them. He's trying to be unsolvable, a target that doesn't follow the expected curve. He weaves through 3 dimensions, using pitch, roll, and throttle, in combinations that make his flight path stutter. The Zeros chase, but can't settle into a firing solution. After 2 minutes, they break off, either low on fuel or frustrated. He doesn't know, doesn't care. He's alive. He lands with hands shaking, adrenaline sour in his mouth. He doesn't mention it in the debrief, claims he dove away and they gave up. But that night, he writes it all down. Bank angles, timing, the way the Zeros reacted. It worked. Once. Maybe luck. Maybe not. He needs to know. 3 days later, another mission. This time, a fighter sweep over New Britain. The goal is to provoke a response, to draw Japanese fighters into an engagement where numbers favor the Americans. The P-38 squadron flies in loose formation, stacked at different altitudes. The sky is a pale, washed-out blue. Clouds are sparse. Visibility is perfect, which means everyone can see everyone. No surprise, no ambush, just a meeting engagement over empty ocean. The Japanese arrive in force. Zeros and Oscars, maybe 16 total. The formations merge. Chaos. The calculator pilot stays with his element leader initially. They dive on a pair of Oscars. Guns chatter. Tracers streak. 1 Oscar trails smoke and peels away. But the victory is short-lived. A glance over his shoulder reveals trouble. 8 Zeros, high and fast, rolling in. Not on him yet, but they will be. His element leader calls for a split. Each pilot breaks opposite, standard tactic. The calculator pilot breaks right, then rolls wings level and pulls into a climb. He watches the Zeros commit. 5 follow his leader. 3 follow him. No, 4. He counts again. 8. All 8 are on him now. His leader has disappeared, either safe or dead. No time to wonder. He's alone. 8 Zeros, open sky, no clouds to duck into, no friendly fighters close enough to help. Radio chatter is a mess of calls and static. His fuel is good, his engines are strong, and his mind, despite the hammering pulse, is clear. The Zeros come in pairs, slashing attacks from different angles. Classic tactic. Force the target to react to one threat, and the other has a clean shot. He knows this. They know he knows. The first pair dives. He breaks hard left, then immediately rolls inverted and pulls, arcing his nose down and away in a plane 60 degrees off his initial turn. The Zero pilots fire where he should have been. Empty sky. The second pair adjusts, coming in flatter, trying to lead him. He chops throttles, extends speed brakes for 1 second, then slams throttles forward and rolls into a climbing spiral. Airspeed bleeds, then surges. The Zeros flash past, too fast to correct. He's inside their turn radius for a moment, no shot, but no danger either. He doesn't try to fight. He's thinking 3 moves ahead. Where will they be in 5 seconds? Where do they expect him? He varies his maneuvers, never repeating. A rolling scissors, a vertical reversal, a flat turn that suddenly becomes a dive, then a zoom climb. Each move disrupts their tracking solution. Each forces them to reacquire, recalculate, reposition. He's using the P-38's strengths in ways no one taught. The twin engines mean he can asymmetric throttle in a turn, tightening his radius briefly without a full rudder input. The counter-rotating props mean no adverse yaw to manage. He can roll and pull simultaneously, carving a helix through the air. It's not graceful. It's abrupt, jarring, nearly brutal, but it works. The Zeros grow frustrated. He can see it. They start firing from longer range, wasting ammunition. One pulls up too steeply and stalls, falling away. 7 now. They regroup, trying a coordinated stern attack. All 7 in trail, guns ready. He waits until the first opens fire, then snaps into a knife-edge turn, pulling with top rudder. His flight path bends impossibly, almost sideways. Tracers stream past his canopy. He can hear the hammering of their guns, feel the airplane shudder in the turbulence of their wake. He reverses again, then again. His vision grays at the edges from G-load. He grunts, tightens his core, forces blood back into his brain. The Zeros are everywhere, but also nowhere. They can't pin him. He's a probabilistic target, a quantum particle refusing to be measured. Every time they commit, he's already transitioning to the next state. 2 more Zeros break off. Fuel, maybe, or frustration. 5 left. They try a new approach, spreading out, attempting to box him. He recognizes the geometry. If he keeps turning, they'll collapse the box. So he stops turning. He rolls wings level, firewall throttles, and accelerates straight at the nearest Zero. A game of chicken. The Zero, startled, breaks left. The box collapses unevenly. He slips through the gap, then rolls inverted and pulls into a split S, diving hard. Now he uses speed. The P-38 accelerates like a brick on rails. The Zeros follow, but fall behind. He's not running, though. He's repositioning. At the bottom of the dive, he pulls level, then zooms back up, bleeding speed for altitude. The Zeros, committed to the dive, take longer to react. He's above them now. The tables haven't turned, but they've tilted. He doesn't chase. He extends away, heading for a cloud line on the horizon. The Zeros follow half-heartedly, then turn back. Maybe they see reinforcements. Maybe they're out of ammunition. He doesn't know, doesn't care. His mouth is dry, flight suit soaked with sweat. His shoulders ache from fighting the controls. But he's alive. He lands 40 minutes later. Fuel gauges low, but not critical. No bullet holes, no damage, just a pilot and an airplane that defied math and came out ahead. The crew chief asks how it went. "Fine," the calculator pilot says. "Just another patrol." The crew chief nods, but he's seen the sweat stains, the tremor in the pilot's hands. He doesn't press. That night, the squadron loses another pilot. Engine failure on takeoff. He carts into the jungle and burns. The war doesn't pause for miracles. But in a tent under mosquito netting, the calculator pilot writes a detailed report. Not for glory, for replication. If it can work once, it can work again. If one pilot can survive 8 attackers through geometry, others can learn the geometry. He drafts a memo, 3 pages, diagrams included. He titles it Non-Standard Defensive Maneuvers for Multi-Axis Threat Evasion. He submits it to the operations officer. The operations officer reads it, frowns, and sets it aside. "He'll look at it later," he says. "Maybe." The calculator pilot nods. He expected nothing more. Weeks pass. The memo sits in a pile of paperwork. But stories spread faster than paper. Other pilots hear about the engagement. 8 zeros, no hits, 1 P-38 pilot. Details morph in the retelling. Some say he shot down 3. Others say he hid in a cloud. The calculator pilot corrects no one. He flies his missions, fills his notebook, and survives. Then a new pilot arrives. Fresh from stateside training, eager and terrified. He's assigned to the calculator pilot's flight. During the briefing, he asks questions, not about targets or frequencies, but about what to do if he's separated and pursued. The squadron commander gives the standard answer. Stay fast, don't turn. The new pilot nods, but looks unsatisfied. After the briefing, he approaches the calculator pilot. "I heard you got away from 8 zeros, he says. "How?" The calculator pilot hesitates. Then he walks the new pilot through it. Not as theory, but as a sequence. When they come from above, don't just brake. Roll and pull in a new axis. Vary your maneuvers. Make them solve a new problem every 3 seconds. The human brain lags. Use that. The new pilot listens, eyes wide. He asks if he can see the diagrams. The calculator pilot shows him the notebook. The new pilot copies the sketches by hand. 2 days later, the new pilot survives a bounce by 3 zeros. He uses a rolling reversal, then a vertical scissors. It's clumsy, but it works. He comes back pale and shaking, but alive. He tells the story in the debrief, crediting the calculator pilot. The operations officer, present this time, listens carefully. After the debrief, he retrieves the memo from the pile. He reads it again. This time, he takes it to the squadron commander. The squadron commander is skeptical but pragmatic. He's lost too many pilots to dismiss anything that might help. He asks the calculator pilot to brief the squadron. Informal, no pressure, just share what you've learned. The calculator pilot agrees. That evening, under a tarp strung between palm trees, he talks. He uses a chalkboard scavenged from a bombed-out school. He draws vectors, angles, and planes of motion. He explains angular rate and sight picture disruption. He talks about human reaction time and how to exploit it. Some pilots listen. Others cross their arms, still skeptical. But a few, the ones who've felt the panic of being pursued, lean in. They ask questions. Can you do this in a dive? What if you're slow? What if there's more than one? The calculator pilot answers each, not with bravado, but with logic. It's not a magic trick, he says. It's just understanding what the airplane can do and what the enemy expects. make those two things diverge. Over the following weeks, more pilots experiment. A rolling reversal here, a vertical displacement there. Not everyone masters it. Some try and fail, reverting to instinct, but a few succeed. Survival rates in multi-attacker scenarios improve, subtly but measurably. Fewer pilots are lost to being swarmed. Fewer come back with tail damage from stern attacks. The data is soft, anecdotal, but it's there. A visiting tactics officer from 5th Air Force Headquarters hears about it. He interviews several pilots, including the calculator pilot. He takes notes, asks for the diagrams. A month later, a new training bulletin is issued. It doesn't mention the calculator pilot by name. It simply describes advanced evasive maneuvers for multi-axis threats. The language is sanitized, bureaucratic, but the content is there. The geometry is there. Fighter squadrons across the theater receive the bulletin. Some ignore it. Others incorporate it into training. In New Guinea, a flight instructor uses the techniques to teach green pilots how to survive their first bounce. In the Philippines, a P-38 ace adapts the maneuvers into his own aggressive style, using them not to evade, but to reverse and counterattack. The ripple spreads, slow but persistent. By late 1944, P-38 pilots have a reputation, not just for speed or firepower, but for being hard to kill. Japanese after-action reports note that American twin-engine fighters evade in unexpected ways, making deflection shooting difficult. The Zero still outturns the Lightning in a flat fight, but fewer fights are flat. The geometry has changed, and with it, the calculus of survival. The calculator pilot is promoted to flight leader, then operations officer. He stops flying combat missions in early 1945, much to his own frustration. He spends the rest of the war training replacements, refining the tactics, and writing reports no one will read for decades. He never becomes an ace. His official kill tally is 2, maybe 3. No one remembers his name in the headlines, but dozens of pilots go home because he thought carefully about angles in open sky. The war ends. He returns to the States, finishes his engineering degree, and takes a job with an aircraft manufacturer. He works in flight test, then structures, then eventually management. He marries, has children, lives quietly in a suburb where no one knows what he did. At company picnics, when someone asks about the war, he says he flew fighters in the Pacific. They nod politely and change the subject. In the 1960s, a military historian researching P-38 tactics comes across the 1943 training bulletin. Intrigued, he tracks down its origin. Interviews with surviving pilots lead him to the calculator pilot, now in his 50s, working at a desk far from any airfield. The historian asks for an interview. The calculator pilot agrees, reluctant but courteous. They sit in a small office. The historian asks about the 8 zeros. The calculator pilot corrects him. It was one engagement, one data point. Others refined it, expanded it, made it real. He's uncomfortable with the attention. The historian presses. Why did you think of it when no one else did? The calculator pilot considers. I didn't think of it, he says. I just stopped assuming the enemy was right. They taught us the Zero was unbeatable in a turn, but unbeatable is a word, not a law. Physics is the law, and physics is negotiable if you understand it. The interview is published in a niche journal. A few aviation enthusiasts read it, but mostly it gathers dust. The calculator pilot retires in the 1970s. He builds model airplanes in his garage. P-38s, mostly, each one painted in the markings of his old squadron. His grandchildren ask why he likes that plane so much. He tells them it was a good airplane. Complicated, but good. They lose interest and go back to their toys. In the 1980s, the Air Force begins developing new fighter tactics for beyond visual range combat: missiles, radar, electronic warfare. But close-in fighting, dogfighting, remains a possibility. Instructors at Fighter Weapons School study historical engagements, looking for principles that transcend technology. Someone unearths the 1943 bulletin, someone else finds the historian's article. A lesson plan is built around it. They don't call it the calculator pilot's technique, they call it three-dimensional threat reaction. But the core idea is the same. Disrupt the enemy's solution. Make yourself unpredictable in a calculated way. Modern pilots fly F-15s and F-16s, faster, deadlier, more complex than anything in World War II. But the principle holds. In a furball, in a merge, when missiles are gone and its guns and airframe, the geometry still matters. The human lag still exists. And the pilot who understands both, who calculates faster than instinct, survives. The calculator pilot dies in 1991. A small obituary runs in the local paper. Survived by his wife, 3 children, 8 grandchildren. Worked in aerospace, veteran. No mention of the 8 zeros, no mention of the memo. His models are boxed up, some donated to a local school. One P-38, carefully painted, ends up in a museum display about home front hobbies. A placard notes it was built by a veteran but gives no details. But in pilot-ready rooms, in training syllabi, in the quiet conversations between instructors and students, the idea persists. Not as his story, but as a truth. That survival in combat is not just courage or skill, but thought. That the difference between life and death can be a single decision to do the math when everyone else is only feeling fear. That logic, applied with precision under pressure, is its own form of heroism. He never wanted credit. He wanted pilots to come home. And they did. Not all, never all, but more than would have otherwise. The war took millions. His contribution saved dozens, maybe a few hundred. In the vast arithmetic of global conflict, a rounding error. But to those dozens, to their families, to the children they had and the lives they built, it was everything. He understood something essential. That war is not the opposite of thought. It's the ultimate test of it. That in the moment when the sky fills with enemies and the instinct is to panic, the mind can still choose geometry. And geometry, cold and pure, can be the warmest form of grace. The P-38 flew on for decades in other roles. Reconnaissance, test bed, eventually scrap. The calculator pilot's notebook, filled with diagrams and numbers, was thrown out after his death. No one knew what it was. But the idea it contained, the small, defiant notion that one person's careful thought could bend the arc of survival, that endures, not in bronze or stone, but in the quiet competence of pilots who still, today, when pressed and desperate, remember to think.